Today's businesses are on a vigilant watch for threats in an ongoing cyber war. It's time to get real-world solutions to protect and secure your valuable business information anytime, anywhere.
Welcome to the show. Today we have Ben Wilcox, a technologist, founder, and thought leader at the intersection of cloud, data, and AI. Ben shares insights from Microsoft Ignite conference, which he just came back from. Him and I were just talking about it. They're doing some really interesting things. He's going to fill us in on that, including some product announcements, some emerging trends in AI-driven productivity, and what organizations should be prepping for as agentic systems just rapidly evolve. We also rewind the clock to hear the origin story of Ben's very first hosting company he launched at 15 years old, which I thought is a phenomenal story when you hear it. It's a journey that shaped his entrepreneurial instincts and his technical foundation long before the cloud era even began. And finally, we delve into the future of data intelligence and agentic workflows, how next generation data platforms, automation, and reasoning engines will transform the way organizations operate secure information and build AI-driven solutions. So you have a mix of industry and personal stories. Welcome to the show, Ben. It's so great to have you. I know I only barely touched your background, but tell us what you're doing and what's new with you.
Thank you, Josh, for having me on the Cybersecurity America. It's an honor to be here today.
Yeah, thank you.
A little bit about me. I'm in New York. Right now I'm under snow. I'm trying to keep warm and all those good things. But yeah, I got back from Ignite about a week and a half ago, giving holiday, and excited to talk about kind of what I saw there. And there's some of the amazing things I think that are happening, both from a technology perspective, a security perspective, and maybe some of the stuff that we can all expect to see in the coming years. A little bit to my surprise, we're much farther ahead in reality when it comes to the agentic side of things than what I was expecting to see.
I could imagine. And look, just your background, you're a chief technology officer, also a chief information security officer. So what a combination. You really see it from both realms. So I'd love to be able to hear what you say, but you're also a race car driver. Is that right? Or you teach race car driving or something to that effect, I remember, right?
Yeah, I do high performance driving instruction. So I teach people to drive on the racetrack. It could be everything from their daily car to things like they have a sports car that they keep, or potentially even a dedicated race car. I've been doing it for about 8 years. It's become a real passion. It's a good way for me to stay focused. And sometimes you need some hobbies outside of what you do during your day. So this is one of mine. It's something I've really fallen in love with.
That's awesome. So tell me the intersection between that CTO and CISO role and what you're doing now. Just kind of elaborate on what are some of the lessons learned you had on that journey, and what is something some of our listeners can take from that and build on it?
Good question. When I think about my dual role responsibility, I feel like we're going to see more of this in the future as a career role, because what AI is forcing is all of these various teams to start working more closely together, right? It used to be, we would do consulting, you walk into and do some work with a bank, right? You'd have your security team over on one side, and then there'd be the IT infrastructure team, and then the network team, and then maybe you might have your data team and so forth. Security was kind of this guardrail to keep everyone safe. Oftentimes they would be going to say, hey, no, you can't do that. Put up a barrier or some sort of blocker. With the cloud in particular, right? And then starting off there, and now with AI, we're getting so much more shadow usage. We started off with shadow cloud usage, and now we're using shadow apps, shadow AI. And security is often kept being very reactive happening in this context. And as I see it, security and all of these other IT roles really do exist to support the business. So I think it's really finding that balance of what is acceptable for your business based on your clients' obligations, what it takes to make sure that your business is still very much thriving in today's very challenging economy, being potentially left behind, right? There's those who are really succeeding, those that are not. And also making sure that when it comes to where we are looking, that security is adhering that compliance as the part for many organizations. We still have that, but we want to make sure that we're sure that we're settled. That is fine. Just regulatory compliance. It may not be necessarily the same way as we were before. We have to work more closely with the business.
That makes sense. Now, one of the fascinating stories you had when you were 15 and you started that business and how that mindset applies to now. I mean, you want to tell us that story about your first business and what are some of the challenges you had to go through? I thought that's a great story. You know?
Sure. When I was a teenager, and this was in the early 90s, early web 1.0 days, you had slow, everything was still dial up at that point, right? There was no real high speed unless you were lucky enough to be at one of the universities or something. So my local ISP provider, he would give you a space on his server and you could host a website. So I had this URL there and I decided to put up a link list. And this link list is what kind of was the early days of the internet, right? There was no Google or anyone out there. You had your list of links, and then you'd be able to find other link lists and find some interesting things there. That's kind of how Yahoo got started. If you remember Yahoo in the early days, there was just a bunch of links out to different sites. And the goal was to always try to get as much traffic and so forth. I got this link list and it started getting popular. My local ISP said, hold on, you're killing all the bandwidth. You're disrupting all my other customers on here. Your link list is too popular. You're going to have to get rid of it. And I said, no, I don't really want to do that because I felt like this was starting to turn into something cool. I liked being able to keep it updated. I decided with a friend who was very computer savvy to be able to basically start a web hosting business. And we built a server out of some old computers that we had. He was really good at Linux, and we installed a Linux distro on there, and we had to get Apache set up. And next thing you know, I had to start hosting from. And it quickly turned into how can we add more customers on here? How can we add more business, right? So it turned into something that ended up operating for roughly about 10 years after that. Went through a little bit of disruption after the dot-com bubble burst. Telco prices really got down and got very competitive. And the big players like GoDaddy got into the business and so decided to sell it off. But that led me to this really entrepreneurial side of things, right? Of thinking about the business aspects of it. And then after that, I ended up doing some development work for about 3 years, getting into things like SharePoint and SQL. Decided that it really wasn't too much of the right fit for me. So I kind of went back to this infrastructure. Joined the company that I'm actually at today, 18 years ago. And I put very Microsoft focus. Since then, I was one of the first people that worked with through cloud technologies and Microsoft side of things and did a Lotus Notes migration in 2008, Exchange Online, or what it was called, the Business Productivity Online Suite. It went absolutely terrible. It was an awful project. Customer had lots of challenges because everything was brand new, and this was we're moving information from one side to through like 3 different hops to get it to the Exchange Online.
Lotus Notes, so you lose yourself.
I do remember using it, and I was also an administrator for a few years, and I remember how awful.
Yeah, I was at EY when we had that. We migrated over to Exchange from there in Outlook. And it was the most painful migrate. I mean, just using Lotus Notes in the first place was painful. They had some features that worked pretty well, the folders options, but it was, it was really painful. And I realized that people nowadays, especially coming into industry in the last 10 years, know no other email system but Microsoft Exchange. They've never been on Lotus Notes or anything like that, other than a pop client or a MyMap client or something like that. They don't know what's in the background. But it's always been Exchange. And I found that interesting. They've never seen the pain of Lotus Notes.
They took over, I think with Exchange Online really kind of put Lotus Notes on its endless side. As soon as the Microsoft made it super easy to administer, people started switching. Yeah, Exchange was much better.
What they doing? So I was an Exchange 5.5 administrator. So I built them on-prem. I built big Exchange cluster servers and everything. And they were huge targets from attack perspective. And moving it to the cloud and just moving that whole service where you don't have to have a big email cluster anymore. I mean, it was just, that was necessary, but we still see breaches on-prem Exchange servers. I do incidents. I've seen those. The recent one, incident I'm going on with now, this is with a law firm where you had someone who has detailed information on the username and password needed in that wire ACH system for a bank, so to speak. won't identify who it is. But they have username password. They log on to the system, but before they do anything malicious there, they call the user and they say, we have 2 or 3 malicious transactions. One's for 15,000 this, and another one's for 16,000 such and such. Do you want me to cancel them? And they go, yeah, absolutely. We want you to cancel them. Those are fraudulent. They go, okay, let's go and cancel that. I'm going to send a verification code to your phone. Can you tell me what that code is so I can verify what you are? Well, that's not to stop the transaction. That's to initiate it. And so they gave them the 2-factor code to initiate the wire transfer and the money's out the door. Boom, all 3. And because they have very detailed targeting, when they called one of the victims, it said the bank's name. It had the bank's name in the caller ID. So they used that as well. So it was a complete fraud and the money's out the door. So who's responsible for it? When you look at the difference between a commercial account and a consumer account, consumer has protection in the banking world. A commercial account does not. If you transferred that money out, you better have business interruption insurance or fraud insurance or something like that, because you're responsible for everything that happens under your ID. So it's just really hoping to where you can find fraudulent transactions quicker, faster, better is where I really hope that AI starts to emerge and is able to see these fraud patterns in ways before, because you didn't want to impact customers. Like, I work security and banking, part of some of those regulations, like NACHA regulations and all, they were designed to stop the banks from holding on to your money. Because in a lot of ways, the banks would take that 1 to 3 business days it takes to move a payment, ACH payment, and they would go sweep it in an account and get interest, because you're not allowed to get interest on a savings account domestically. So you send it overseas, you get interest overnight. And so they want a faster mechanism to make sure you get paid and it doesn't break some other payment. But the mechanisms when fraud's detected and how to get the money back and how to stop it is not on the side of the consumer. It's on the side of the bank. And so I'm hoping maybe there's some technology in the future here really that really focuses on that.
Yeah, you're giving me a little bit of a flashback with that story that you were telling me, Josh. My first incident response was actually very similar to what you just described, except for it was an actual compromise on the desktop side. It ended up in wire fraud, basically payments leaving, but they were able to see it right from the CFO's desk to do the transaction right on his computer. Looked very similar. Too late on the bank side to stop it because it was used to that similar size transaction size. And the big difference today, I think at least, is that those are probably less common the way that the remote administration of the desktops is, right? Those EDR tools are much better today at seeing those types of activities, and we've done a great job securing this. Identities are still not that secure today.
It's definitely identities, because I've been in intrusions where they actually just used the third-party remote access cloud service, like Kaseya. They just took over the service, so it's already there. It's installed on every desktop. Everybody made sure it works. It is the perfect tool, and it's living off the land, is what they call it. You're using tools that are native to your environment. You're not trying to put malware or download foreign tools where you might get detected. Those are the perfect ones to punch holes on things. I actually saw an intrusion where they staged a water hole attack. So they would take a PowerShell script. There's a known error that you get on some Windows machines. And what they would do is create an article, give you a PowerShell script to fix that error. But at the bottom of it, it's malicious. It actually calls malicious payload. So yeah, does it fix your Windows problem you have on your machine? Absolutely. As it also lands malware on your machine at the same time. Because you just think about it, you never think that would be malicious and would be in a PowerShell script. I do these incidents where you see PowerShell is just open wide within an organization. Everybody uses PowerShell. They're unsigned. They're not even logged. So you can run malicious PowerShell scripts and you base 64 and they get through security controls and go right through things. So, so you were saying, do EDR tools catch these? Yes, sometimes, sort of. CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, they all have the different ways they handle different things. But for the most part, if it's like an approved app, you're not going to see it. You have to do like forensic report. Yeah. Yeah. Now, tell me what y'all do at Proarch. What is kind of y'all's specialty? Like, if I'm looking and I'm talking to a customer or I want a solution in something, when do I think, hey, I need to go call y'all?
Yeah, so our specialty is really taking the data and getting to the intelligence side. And to be able to do that in today's world, right? security has to be the very foundation. We need to be able to secure that data. We need to make sure we have a secure infrastructure around it. We need to make sure that we're doing secure data practices within it. That can get into data governance, right? Because there starts to be a little bit of a bleeding between security and privacy of information, as well as data controls that you want to be able to put in place. But once you have that secure data foundation in place, then you can start using AI. So we're truly a full life cycle technology organization, really designed to help organizations move wherever their barrier is in that journey and help get ahead.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because one thing I know from these AI engagements we see at customer environments, it's all about the data. It's all about the data, and it's somewhat all about the data. So the ability to have it clean, the ability to have it properly vectorized, all that, to be able to actually utilize it in any applications and actually solve business problems. So you can't have poor data and just think that somehow AI is going to make up for it, and you're coming up to a disaster. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well? It's really
100%.
about...
And even take your threat actors, right? What are they stealing these days? They're stealing the data. They're ransoming off your data, right? Like, so you had to have strong controls in place. And we have more and more third-party vendors and being able to take stuff out there, right? Take some of the stuff with Salesforce and maybe some of the most recent OAuth breaches for third parties. Well, people are tying in all these platforms. And so the reason they're tying it in is that story, right? The data is powerful. If you can have agents do things for you in the future, being able to update records or do sales for you, that's a powerful business tool. But we need to be able to secure that information. We need to be able to control that and give visibility within all of those pieces. But also, at the end of the day, it's about the business outcomes, right? That's what's going to fuel your IT budget and your security budget. Is, when you can align to the business, you're going to be able to buy in.
And I'm thinking, as the architecture's changed over time, right? So in the banking world, ACH wire transfers, they're all files. They're all file-based, secure FTP. You move data on the back end, and then you batched it into mainframes. And then you have enterprise service buses, where everything was a service and you had to decouple from different platforms, your ability to be able to tie them in. Now it just seems to be not batching. It's all agentic workflows that everyone wants to move to, where you're taking an agent, which in Microsoft Copilot world really is YAML, and it's just wrapped in to allow you to expose a lot of services, a lot of libraries that it's capable of doing. But that a lot of these agentic workflows are going to take over, but they really are not useful unless you do kind of that level one. Where's your data? How are you producing it? What's its life cycle? And some of us just don't want to do that work. We just want to jump into writing agents to make them all things, right? And so how important is, and what would you do like step one? If I wanted to really start to analyze my data, what do I do?
I would do a data security assessment, understand, right? Get the visibility. And for Microsoft, there's a ton of tools out there that really do that. There's a tool called DSPM. It's Data Security Posture Management. It's part of Purview. That will help you get some of the visibility into...
That's a paid license on the Microsoft E5?
It is a paid license, a part of the E5 security side of things. They now call it Purview Suite. But there's a trial to start off with. So even if you don't have it, you can have it, visibility there. That will tell you how your organization is using AI and what sort of data potentially could be going in there. You can also do a data discovery around using Purview. And specifically, if you wanted to just look at what is happening within your Microsoft 365 environment, that's where a lot of us are storing our information. We might have some on-prem stuff too. But Purview, you can do a data discovery through the information that might exist within your environment. So that could be in your email, it could be in Teams, it could be in SharePoint. There's a install that you can do for file servers, for example, CIF shares or NSF shares, whatever.
Connector.
Yeah, there's connectors that go over into various cloud apps sides of things as well. So you can pull that information, start having the tool look at saying, if you have, for example, HIPAA compliance applications, or when you're looking for your personal identifiable information, right? It could be social security number, things. It can get some of that information and tell you where some of these information pieces. One thing that I've discovered, and that is honestly probably And since AI has really come about in 2023, right? And the agentic side is everyone wants to first figure out where the stuff is. Reality is it's all over the place. With a reassessment that was done, we find stuff that's unexpectedly in different areas, right? This guy who thought he had everything under control. Turns out that he all because the current DLP tool was highlighting it, was finding it, but it was sending him an alert and actually had the identifiable information in the email.
You just triggered a story. So I was at a bank. I'm not going to say the name of the bank. So I was at Ernst & Young. This was on a project. And I was happened to audit the data protection rules for sensitive information going out the bank. And they had email encryption, and that was what they were telling the OCC was the control that was in place. So part of my job supporting the audit team at EY was to go verify if that's real and how it's implemented and if it's working and all that stuff. And was interesting, he shows me this dashboard of statistics of all the encrypted messages and how sensitive information is being stopped and that they're calling this many people and this is how many tickets they had and, seeing this volume of activity. And so I was like, okay, so what happens when somebody tries to send something sensitive out of the bank? We stop it and we tell them it needs to be encrypted. So you don't tell them it needs to not go outside the bank. No, it just needs to be encrypted. We don't know if he's authorized to send anything out. They shouldn't be sending that stuff out anyway. But the control is actually to make people do it encrypted. So the whole intent was supposed to be data leak protection. And all it was forcing encrypted leakage of information. It was just saying encrypt it to yourself when you sent it. It wasn't why are you sending out credit card information and social security numbers out the window? So it was really interesting how that control, it's almost like legislative intent. The intent was to stop sensitive information from going out the bank, not to just adhere to a control that says if it does, it must be encrypted with no care if it really needed to go out in the first place. So he reminded me of that one.
It's amazing where people forget things go, right? So you have a great example there of forcing some sort of maybe not even a good understanding of that existing control. The actual obligation is.
Well, one of the things I've been doing lately here has been doing a lot of study and work on like OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities in LLM models. So part of my background in cyber was a lot of the application vulnerabilities and how do you do pen tests on web applications and so forth. And so this was how do you abuse models? How do you violate guardrails and so forth? I thought it was quite interesting. It maps it to that top 10. But a few of them is telling the model to actually turn off or telling the LLM model to turn off any security controls that you have. And a lot of times it does it. It just turns those security controls off because it's very helpful and so forth. So it's really interesting to see how on the web application side, you had the front end, JavaScript, right? It's all input validation. There was threats at that level. Then once you post that back to a web server, you have the backend code, you're running Java, ASP, whatever it is, you have threats on that side of it and vulnerabilities on that side of it. And then now you have what's embedded in the data. Very similar, I think, in the LLM side, you have prompt injection attacks. What are you allowed to tell that agent? What are we doing our RAG settings? And RAG is being abused heavily, we see now. And then some of these models are we've had a couple breaches I've seen. If Microsoft Copilot, for instance, does not have like an RBAC model for data. So we have one customer that had breach. So we're having a layoff and it was in a spreadsheet and it was finance was using it. And the agent knew about it. And so they just asked Copilot if we're having a layoff and who's on the list. And it told them, it responded with it caused the whole problem. And what you notice is that the Copilot agents has normal NTFS permissions. It says you can read, write, or change something, but it doesn't say, hey, when you respond to a normal employee, say this. When you respond to the head of HR, and the head of HR asks what's going on in this area and respond this different way. It just responds. And so I'm noticing kind of AI's ability to want to help is also causing security issues at the same time. I don't know. Have you seen any of that?
Oh, completely. I mean, when it comes to what the situation just described, right? If AI doesn't know that they shouldn't have access to that information, right? Unless there's some sort of labeling, like either through Purview or something, right? Some sort of data loss prevention in English, or it doesn't have access to it. If they have access to it, they just aren't aware of where that information lives. It's going to give you the answer.
And I've been in talk with this company called Ghost API, and they're writing something that kind of sits in the middle of that, because that's what they're seeing. You need some RBAC model that's in between the agent and the data. I thought it was interesting when I heard that SaaS applications are dead. I've heard that from with the CEO of Microsoft saying that big entrepreneurs now, some guys that have done 4 or 5 different investments in different companies are not doing SaaS anymore. Everything's agentic workflow. And that anything you can do SaaS now is going to go on the agentic side. I mean, what are your thoughts when you hear stuff like that?
Well, if the San Francisco media has anything to say about this, and if you come into San Francisco downtown, you'll see everything is AI. There is not one single mention of a productivity app or a SaaS app. It is all about agentic. Every single billboard, it's either targeting startups or targeting businesses that use AI. Yeah. Which made you feel like you're in a different place. What's not in there a couple of weeks ago? No, we see that
hype now. That marketing hype just everywhere.
It's a different angle, right? I think you got to kind of look at what are they actually doing in the AI space, right? Is it just the chatbot sitting on front? Because that's not AI, right? Or is it able to do things, reason, leverage knowledge that in different platforms and being able to perform some service that's useful, like that stuff. Or going back to the other traditional AI that we knew 10 years ago, like the vision or the ability to do predictive machine learning on stuff, right? And see what the future might look for at infrastructure. Like that is still real, and actually we're seeing more interest in some of that as the ability of agents being able to be assistants. Now you have this information coming inbound, right? We have some ideas of something that might be happening in the future that could go wrong. With that agent, can you preemptively fix that or give you knowledge about how to do that? Like that's a useful task.
Yeah, I had a great talk with a buddy last night on with Scott. So who knows if it's really accurate, a good idea or not. But can you imagine being in like the Brazilian jungle and you broke your leg, or there's some sickness, bacterial infection, you don't know what to do? Wouldn't it nice to have a medical kit? You just open it up, you're able to hit this AI agent. You can say, these are the symptoms. This is what there's, and it just will continue to narrow down and give you emergency medicine advice, and allow you to save more lives. I don't know. I think something like that, rather than going, I don't know, he's not breathing, I don't jump on him, push on his chest, but having some agent that can walk you through. I always saw it like Tony Stark, where he's in the lab, right? And he says like, Jarvis, turn it up to 74 degrees. So it's AI assisted. It is doing mundane things quicker, faster, better, so you can concentrate on more critical things. I'll give you an example. I had, when I was working for another cybersecurity company, we would do a marketing slick of our services. It's only 2-3 slides, right? And it needed to make sure it went through brand. It had to do all this. It took a month to send it to an external marketing company. You had to get on their calendar, review, a month to get this 2-page. Where you can use tools now and get it done in less than an hour, and it looked beautiful, and take some tuning and tweaking. Like my website, darkstack7.com, I did it with Lovable, and it was the first time I ever wrote a website without actually doing HTML or dropping and dragging, not using my mouse. So you're just interacting with the model, and it has really great microsites that it creates extraordinary. But what I found out is its beauty and its creativity all depended on my ability to write the prompts and tell it what I wanted. That was the real struggle at first. And so I almost see where business executive management, where they're getting into having prompt engineering is going to be part of it. Your ability to ask these models things properly and how to use reference. A good buddy of mine works for a big company, and the CEO used to have 2 or 3 admins that helped write his stories and his presentations every time he went to the Chamber of Commerce in Los Angeles or whatever these big events, right? He needs help. And they were showing where they were actually using GPTs, and they used reference of the guy's childhood and what was his background and all that. And it just saved a tremendous amount of time creating all that and creating his background and his presentations, allowing him and the staff to concentrate on getting the numbers out or what's the next service. It just, in many ways, I think AI seems to be a danger and a threat to some people, but in many ways, it seems like, man, if we could just take that mundane stuff and automate it, it makes sense to make things a lot more creative. But it's almost like when you have a neighborhood, you have the conservative does not want more houses. They don't want more expansion. They want, small town type feel to it. And then you got the expansionists that want to get in and they want to build houses on top of houses. And so how do you balance those kind of philosophical approaches? I don't know. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I personally would never want to go back to a time without generative AI as an assistant to me. I mean, I do a lot of PowerPoints. I do a lot of webinars, like just conversation, a lot of communication stuff. Like, I think I am so much more productive today, and I don't feel like I'm actually putting out junk either. Like, I feel like I'm actually making some good content. Like, it can get me 70% of the way there with the right prompts. That being is the secret sauce for everyone going forward, right? Is more prompts really matter, and that's what's driving it. Like, if we were to think about like businesses in the future, right? It's all going to be prompt based, right? Like, your prompts are going to be the ones that distinguish your business, and differentiate how you produce things, how well you can do something. How can you manipulate this engine? And I was thinking back a couple of years ago, right? I was thinking, well, ChatGPT came out and everyone else is racing to create these large language models. Well, everyone's going to be doing a large language model. I don't think so. I think that people are going to be using commercial ones, the open source one, and the controls to tailor the output is just going to get better and better. And that's where people are going to be able to make some differentiation between what they're doing is how well your model can do with, for example, programming, right? A lot of people I've been talking to are in the process of deciding what is their AI assistant list. Is it a Copilot? Or is it going to be Claude on their side? Or is it going to be one of the other out there?
I think you break those into different groups too, right? So like Claude, I love for strategic stuff. Like I want to see the thought pattern. I want to be able to say, I'm going to write this on my virtual CISO service. I ran through Claude, for instance, and it helps strategize, and sometimes it's a little too verbose. And some of these models, you put them in that strategic category, and then some like Otter and some of the other ones that do transcriptions. They can join your meeting and they listen to what's happening and then they summarize it and they send you this person said this and so forth. I see those in like AI productivity tools. And then there's this whole other layer of business automation where you're using Agentic-AI and GPTs to automate, and that's a lot more complicated. So I think people get confused. They go, well, am I using AI? Yeah, well, I'm using Otter and it takes my meeting notices. Well, wait a minute. I see you're using that as a productivity, and that's great. We put that into this risk category here. It does have sensitive information. Every meeting you're having with somebody is getting recorded now. That never happened. When I worked for banks for the longest time, it was illegal for us to record anything on the conversation. Legal team didn't want us recording anything. Now you're having agents that are showing up in some of these meetings where there's more agents than humans. Everyone's dragging around an agent, and very soon these agents are going to meet. That's the key here is once MCP, which is I think you know what MCP is, Model Context Protocol. We're having agents able to talk to other agents and do it in a much better way. Is I won't have to go meet with that client. I'm going to send my agent to go talk to his agent, and they can just meet on agent time. And I can get a brief that tells me, hey, what I need to know. And do we need to set up an in-person to discuss? Yes. And then they set up the meeting. I really do see where you're sending your agent in email almost to interact with someone else and ask natural languages back and forth. Right. So.
I concur. That's going to happen someday. I joined a meeting the other day and I had never talked to this person before. Before he even joined, there was 3 agents from 3 different services out there recording and transcribing. I'm like, this guy's got a security problem. He doesn't even know it, right? He had 3 agents on hand. Who knows what the back end services are, right? Everything is connected these days. you really know, like, have you read the terms of service in those agreements? And do you know what third-party processing is happening there? Are they sending your stuff outside of your compliance boundaries or whatever you might be adhered to today? Quite possibly.
Well, and that's kind of why I stopped using Otter, for instance. There's a federal law. There was a lawsuit because they were recording at all times and transcribing, and they weren't supposed to. There's something to that effect. So I saw that article. So I think privacy with these agents are going to be huge. I knew when that guy blew himself up in that Tesla at Trump Tower in Vegas, and the police released his Chat GPT records. Now I know that's serious because we have just changed. I've never heard of anybody having their Chat GPT records summoned by the police or put out there in public. But you can see where that actually shows intent, because before it was all Google keywords. And you can say, well, what did he really mean by that keyword? And well, now you're really asking very detailed things of the agent. So I could see your agent being subpoenaed,
Sure.
being subpoenaed. And what interaction did you have with your, I don't know, owner or master, or however the agent references us. But you could see where that's going to kind of change a few things here. I also think it changes a lot of things from an audit perspective. I used to spend a ton of time pulling records of log-ons on systems in order to give it to an auditor. And it was static data, and it was only good for a certain time period. And I know what they wanted. They wanted to know if the security control was adequate so they can report back to the Federal Reserve or to the OCC or whatever that this control was in place. I understand what they're getting, but the burden was so intense. We were fighting cyber criminals all day long, pulling data and everything all the time, and pulling reports and spreadsheets was just really a pain. But you could see where if I had agentic support and I use AI agents for that, I can just authorize my agent to talk to that auditor, and the auditor will get any of the forms and the documents and things that they need from that. I just think there's a lot more that we can do. I give you another example. In the world of incident response, it's really hard to get people up to speed who are junior right out of school, because it's just so complicated. It's much different than what you do in school, what you do in a real ransomware attack with $25 million on the line. So one of the things you have to do is you have to be a mentor. You got to answer that person's questions. You got to show them where things are. It just takes a senior person an impact of about 60%. We registered of him or her having to bring 2 or 3 junior people up to speed. It's a real impact. Well, why couldn't you have an agent is that mentor, and those junior personnel can ask those natural language questions they need about the job on how do you do this and where's this at, and just ask the agent. So from an onboarding perspective, it goes really quick and fast, and I don't feel like an idiot that's got to ask my boss everything because I'm new. I don't know where it's at, but we spend so much time trying to update documentation or say go to SharePoint. Like, I think the agentic world is going to destroy SharePoint, and very much instead of me searching SharePoint looking for some document that wasn't updated since 2016, I just want to ask for the information. Hey, what is the policy for, I don't know, college reimbursement right now? Boom, here it is. This is the reference. Just what I need to. But going through trying to find the SharePoint site for HR, trying to find the documents section there, trying to find, just. And then
it's the current one, right? Today, the current version. Is it the one that someone sent you in your email, or is it the one in the SharePoint? Those are all valid, right? And you're spot on here with where the problem is, right? And some of it's just old information. We got old stuff all over the place, and that's another reason for looking at that data security spot. Know how old your stuff is, right? Is it relevant anymore?
I call it security anthropology. So because as a consultant for so many years, I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton as well. We did a lot of transformation. So you would have one merger and acquisition, and they're transferring the security program. You got to put both security operations centers together. It's kind of a mess, and protect both at the same time. And you would see these documents or these projects that I guess they got 60% through and just died, and they weren't been updated. But it slows you down because you got to sit there and go, is that real? Is this something, these documents, something I really need to worry about? All the procedures seem real old. And then you're studying them, and then somebody walks in and we're going, no, we didn't do any of that. That was failed. We never even implemented any of it. So it makes it real difficult in these transformations to figure out what's real, what's not.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point, right? This old knowledge. So let me share something I saw at night, which kind of blew my mind. So if you're in building out an Azure environment, there's a thing called landing zones that It's a defined pattern that's both secure, helps you can ensure that you have good governance, cost controls, et cetera, on there. And these patterns are updated by Microsoft, and it's like the enterprise architecture essentially of what you'd be doing in your Azure environment. And you layer them on. And so this new agent that Microsoft built. So in the past, I was thinking about our team and how we do this, right? We have to have a subject matter expert in all of these Azure areas, right? That are very specific to security, to infrastructure, to platform services, to data services.
Right.
Them all in a room, and we have conversations, and they all have to keep updated with the most recent material as well. This agent does, right? It just goes and looks at the most recent information. It builds it dynamically because it knows the patterns and it has that knowledge today. It doesn't mean that you still don't need to know some stuff, but it's actually able to build this and deploy it much quicker, much faster than a person can, right? A much higher level of accuracy. I would still certainly go back and audit and look at all these things, right? And make sure that it's all right. It doesn't matter if it's a human or an agent that's doing it, right? There needs to be some accountability and traceability there looking at it. But, this stuff goes so much faster, right? And this is all built off of most current knowledge instead of us building, for example, here's a documentation book, right? And here are all the links of everything that goes out there. And now someone's going to keep this updated. Just go to the single source of truth that Microsoft has in their knowledge base and do it all. And it all does it through MCP servers. Querying all these different data sources through MCP.
Yeah, and there's a lot of changes with MCP, and they got a lot more security controls are going on top of MCP. And then how, for everybody listening, it's model context protocol. It's how do I communicate and push context back and forth to different models. And it's going to be the key to connecting everything in the future. I'm assuming some other protocol may come out in the future and do something else that does something better. And we all go, wow, MCP was really ancient. But I mean, just it trying to make bridge some communications. I think it was a first good attempt. Some of the things here, I had one client I met with just this morning. It's a big university. And we were asking what's their AI strategy and roadmap and so forth. And he goes, to be honest, nobody's hitting us up for anything. We tried Microsoft Copilot. We looked at how expensive it was. Just nobody at the university and all is using AI. And I was like, you just don't know about it. A lot of people 100%. Are throwing things in ChatGPT and open models. And so it was interesting to be in a big university like that, but still be completely disconnected on the use of this technology internally. I'm sure many homework papers and things have been used on that. Kids find out about it really quick and fast. But you would also think, just from a compliance perspective, like they said that a lot of everything is in an O365 environment. So it makes sense to be able to use some of those different services and like Purview and so forth. But some of them are in multi-environment. You got AWS is where application data really lives. A lot of third party, especially in the banking world, you have those platforms for wire transfer you to log on to. That's not owned by the bank. That's a third party provider. They just put a front end on it. So all of that is like that. They're not in the business of building wire transfer systems. They're in the business of connecting their customers to services. So you have a real supply chain problem. I remember I was doing third-party risk, and we were getting into fourth-party risk here. It was because you had a service that you're consuming. Well, that has a hosting provider, and then that had 2 or 3 service providers. And before you know it, you're doing like fourth-party risk. It just become real problematic. You would think in the future, AI would be able to streamline and automate a lot of that kind of risk discovery, right? Instead of having teams and teams of people try to figure out what does that company have, who are your partners, who is it? It just seems like that would be something that we could get to quicker, faster, and make risk decisions. Because actual supply chain risk, I was working for a big pharmaceutical right during the pandemic. It was the craziest time period because we had manufacturing sites that were getting hit by ransomware, and we couldn't leave our houses. We were all in lockdown. So you're running a security operations center in lockdown during the pandemic, and precursor medicine was not making it. So like diabetes medicine that was being produced, they couldn't make it because they only had so much on stock until the manufacturing site runs out of precursor. And then now you're in trouble. You can't make and fulfill medicine prescriptions and so forth. But you can see what in a time period like that, trying to figure out what is, what is on hand, what do we need to respond to, what do you need to do in this kind of different challenges. becomes really a monumental kind of task. Where do you prioritize in a disaster like that? How do you move your resources? And I think AI will help make a lot of these decisions quicker, faster, better, because I think that is really the attacks of the future. Those supply chains that you're relying on is, what did we have? Didn't Azure get hit not too long ago with like an 8 terabyte denial of service attack?
Yeah,
That
it
was
was the biggest one that ever existed that came across. And yeah, there's some big stuff happening out there, right? You see with all of these devices, everything's more interconnected. Everyone's has more bandwidth than they ever have. These types of events are going to have the DDoS for their exploit.
Yeah, just like in home security, most people don't know this, but why I use hardwired cameras around the house here, because if you use those Wi-Fi cameras, you could easily jam them, and then after a while, they overrun their buffers, so they don't record anything. And they're attempting, they'll save it locally for a little bit, so you can walk into somebody's house, just jam all their Wi-Fi cameras, but you can't do that if it's hardwired back to a DVR. So that's always interesting. Man, Ben, it has been great talking to you. I feel like we could go on for hours, but if we were to get in touch with you and Proarch, where can we find out more about you and your company?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I got a whole bunch of stuff about Ignite that I've posted in the past couple of days here. You're going to hear about all of the new agent stuff, anything that they're doing around security. There's so many areas on that front. So certainly find me on LinkedIn, Ben Wilcox. The company's Proarch, Proarch. And you can visit us at proarch.com. Active on the blog on there too. So thank you so much, Josh, for having me on here.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, to our sponsor, DarkStack7, a cybersecurity company, a number of different services from virtual chief information security officer, security consulting, engineering, solution engineering, and so forth. So come look at us. Go to www.darkstack.7. I encourage everybody to follow and subscribe to the show. It just takes a minute to hit that like button, put a comment in. If you have a question, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And definitely share it out with your friends. Thanks for everybody tuning in, and stay secure.